What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so continuing on with Shazam, one of the things we talked about in the first video is that this is literally almost a perfect continuation of the Justice League backup series, which is kind of crazy. It felt like that was the case. That's kind of how it felt, reading the first story. And then you pick up with this and like Sivana, and it's like, yeah, so it's basically a perfect continuation. Now, at the end of the first video, or really the end of the first comic, we essentially had like the return of Billy Batson's father, who had just kind of shown up on the doorstep of his foster parents and said like, I'm here for Billy. And it's kind of cool because one of the things about Jeff Johns' writing, this is one of the most important things about Jeff Johns' writing, is he's very much like Chris Claremont, right? Like where he focuses more on the characters and then focuses on the story second. And this is cool because one, it makes the characters relatable, and two, it gives you a reason to care about what happens to them and then care about what happens in the story. And so with that happening, like the foster parents of Billy are essentially like freaking out. And it makes sense, right? I mean, like if you were a foster parent and you had like a biological parent show up on your doorstep and say like, I'm here to see my son, there's not a whole lot you can do. That if the parent is considered of sound mind by whatever agencies determine that, then you would have to give up your kid. And it's kind of crazy because as time has progressed, Billy's changed a lot over the years. And that was one of the big things about his character, is that he initially started out very rebellious and very much against the idea of like anybody in this family. And then as time progressed, began to grow closer towards them, especially when they became a part of the Shazam family proper, at least the younger kids did. And so Billy's essentially like made a home here, and to suddenly be yanked away from that. And so for his character, when the time comes when he meets his dad, which will come, then that's going to turn into a very confusing situation, because on one hand, he's going to be like, this is my family though. And then on the other hand, be like, well, this is my dad. So it does kind of create for an interesting look in terms of like where the story's going to go and how they're going to relate. Now for the Shazam kids themselves, they're still down in what's basically the Rock of Eternity, discovering that giant map with the magic lands. And of course, when they're given like all these different locations, one of them is called Funland. And they're like, let's go there, which is exactly what I would do. Let me tell you something, man. Like if there was a place called Funland where like all you do is have fun, I mean, technically it's called Disney World, but like if all you did was have fun, like I would go there and just never leave. I would be like, so this is my home now. Everyone I've ever known, well, I would take Mariah with me. I would take Mariah with me, and then I would be like, okay, like we're leaving everything behind, and we're gonna go to Funland. Like we're gonna go to Funland, and we're gonna have fun. Like we're just gonna ride roller coasters and stuff like that. Which it looks like it would be cool because like once they actually get there, dude, it looks like the most fun ever. I mean, dude, look at this place. Like there's roller coasters and balloons and like candy and like really tasty food and things that would probably make your teeth rot out. But and there's like teacups and all kinds of stuff. It looks like the most fun ever. Like it looks pretty awesome. Like it looks pretty amazing. I want to know down in the comment section. Would you guys abandon your life and everything you know, like every friend you've ever made and all that kind of stuff? Would you guys abandon that whole, like all that stuff to go hang out at Funland? Like what lengths would you go to hang out in Funland? Like where you get to ride roller coasters and eat candy all day long? I'm kind of curious. I'm really curious what you guys would end up doing here. Like, I'm going to ask Mariah that question. Like, would she abandon me and everything she knows to go hang out in Funland? I feel like she would say yes. I feel like she would say yes. She'd be like, Rob, it's been real and it's been good, but it ain't been real good. Peace. And bail out and go to Funland. That would be crazy. So getting into, all right, this is something a little more important here, kind of getting into like the history aspect of this. So what we end up doing is we basically pick up with what looks like a doctor's office, and we pick up with Dr. Sivana. Now, Dr. Sivana, as he's shown here, doesn't really seem to be operating in the way we would normally expect, which is to say him basically like plotting and scheming to find a way to take out Billy Batson. And the reason for this is really kind of revealed when we end up finding out he's under the influence of Mr. Mind. Now, Mr. Mind goes way back to like Captain Marvel Adventures number 26 in 1943. Now, back then, when he was created by Otto Bender, he was just kind of like just one of several characters who were there just for the sake of telling a story, right? Like that's 1940s comics, right? Like for the most part, they were usually one-offs, and that's why Mr. Mind and the the Society of Evil Monsters or the Monster Society of Evil or whatever it is. That's the reason why that team is so important. Is because prior to that, whenever you had villains who showed up in comics, for the most part, they didn't exist as teams. They were just individual villains who would face off against a hero, and the villains would generally be created for the story. When it came to like the Society of Monsters or the Evil Society of Monsters, whatever it was the first time in the history of comic books that a single team had been created that was composed of villains who would face off against superheroes consistently. And so that's why Mr. Mind, while he hasn't always had the most significant role in DC Comics, he's really more of like a legacy character, right? Like he's one of those characters that changed the dynamic of comics. And usually when it comes to the comic book industry as a whole, those characters always seem to kind of hang on, like Starro in the Justice League. Starro sucks. For the most part, he kind of sucks. sucks. Usually he sucks, but he's like a giant starfish that can use mind control. But while that's not particularly special in and of itself, what makes him important is he's the first villain the Justice League ever faced. And so he's a legacy character. He carries on throughout the comic book landscape and always will, if for no other reason just because of the legacy that he created by being the central villain by which the most popular team in the history of, or really the most well-known team in the history of comics had unified and faced off against. Now, one of the things that I want to do here is I want to kind of talk about Mr. Mind for a second and why it matters that he's here. So for the most part, again, Mr. Mind, I mean, he had his Monster Society and that kind of stuff, and he kind of waxed and waned. The biggest moment of his character came out of Infinite Crisis in 52. So when it came to Infinite Crisis, you of course had Crisis on Infinite Earths. And Crisis on Infinite Earths, so the way that I like to explain it to people is Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed the multiverse, Infinite Crisis brought it back, and Final Crisis made the heroes aware of the return of the multiverse. With Infinite Crisis being brought back, the problem was that when those duplicate Earths arrived, when they appeared, they were all for the most part identical to the main DC universe. The role that Mr. Mind played when it came to the events of Infinite Crisis in 52 is he literally consumed portions of those universes' histories, thereby changing them and making them each unique and different. And so the reason why this happened is because he's basically like a Venusian worm. And in and of itself, that just kind of imbues him with a few powers, telepathy, things like that. The difference here is that he essentially was imbued with like all the powers, the sum totality of the powers of his own race. And that in turn made him godly powerful. And so what he had the ability to do was jump from one host body to the next and then seize control of that person, their abilities and their powers and their mind, and then use them for his own ends. Now, in the future, he ended up achieving like this giant, worm form or whatever it was. And that's when he was consuming universes. But following, once his role was served, once basically he served as the vector by which each different universe could be made its own, each different Earth could have its own history, so to speak, then he was essentially sent back to the very beginning of when Dr. Sivana first found him and then put inside some bottle or something like that. It's weird. But nonetheless, the fact remains that in this instance, this kind of ties into like the New 52, right? So like in the New 52, Dr. Sivana was looking for a way to stop a calamity that would impact his family, I'm pretty sure. He discovered magic, the tomb of Black Adam. At least he thought it was a tomb of Black Adam. He was hit with some magical energy. It made him blind in one eye, but he can see magic, which is why his eye glows that way. And the result is that he eventually ran into Mr. Mind. And so Mr. Mind has since been controlling him ever since that happened. And that all really kind of took place at the Rock of Eternity, right? Like when Sivana went to the Rock of Eternity, tried to gain entrance, he heard some disembodied voice. It turned out to be Mr. Mind. Mr. Mind seized control of him, and he's been controlling him ever since. And so that's really kind of like how all that comes to bear. Now, the reality of this is that it'll ultimately lead to some massive calamity or something like that. And then Sivana will officially step into his classical role when he is, the Green Goblin to Spider-Man, so to speak, when he's like the arch nemesis of Shazam of Billy Batson. But again, it's kind of switching back to Billy and them proper. This is a cool little thing here. I mean, again, there's not a lot to go on with this story. It's more or less just them just kind of having like an amazing time and just like eating cake and all that kind of stuff and just kind of going nuts and having a great time. All the things that I would do. I feel like in a place like this place is like Magic Kingdom on steroids. Like you go to Magic Kingdom and it's like, okay, so like I was an adult and then like I walked through the gates and now I'm like a child and you're watching like the festival, like the Parade of Fantasy. Oh my God, the Parade of Fantasy. You're like, man, do the Parade of Fantasy. Man, let me tell y'all something. 2 weeks I'm gonna be in Disney World. Me and Mariah going to Disney World for Valentine's Day. 2 weeks. And I'm so hyped, dude. Magic Kingdom. Oh my God, I love Magic Kingdom. The food and the candy and the Pirates of the Caribbean and all that kind of, it's gonna be so cool. Anyway, with them going through here, and really, this is kind of the funny thing, is on one half, you've basically got kids having like what is essentially the time of their lives. On the other half, it's like, but maybe there's something off about this place. Like we should figure out what's going on here. And so kind of poking around and looking around, what we end up doing is running into King Kid, who's like the 7th champion of the family. He's basically been missing all this time. It is Jeff Johns throwing in like a new member of the Shazam family. Now, what his powers are, we don't really know. And that's what makes it kind of cool, is for the most part, when it's come to Shazam, all the members of the Shazam family essentially have the same powers to a degree. They might wax and wane and change a little bit. One might be like the strongest of them. The other one might be like the fastest of them. And then Billy Batson's like basically Super Mario, where he's like the all-around character. It kind of fluctuates based on different members of the family, but we don't really know what this kid's powers are because everybody else really kind of has a gamut covered. And so when you go into this scenario, it's, well, maybe he has the ability to like control a universal space or like create a dimension or create like dimensional gateways or something along those lines. We don't really know. It's really anybody's guess here, but I am excited to find out. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.